are organizations that shape history and others that operate just outside of it. Some are built on tradition, philosophy, and brotherhood. Others are driven by control, belief, and influence. And somewhere in between is a line most people never think to question. Welcome to Secret Societies, Cults, and Coffee. I'm your host, George Turner. Here, we take a look at the world's most secretive organizations, from centuries-old fraternal societies to modern, highly manipulative and controlling groups, to the stories that blur the line between myth and reality. So, whether you're here for the history or just a strong cup of curiosity, you're in the right place. Grab some coffee and let's get into it. There's a word people use, often loosely, and usually without definition. That word is secret. It gets applied to everything from private clubs to ancient orders and societies to organizations accused of shaping the world from the shadows. And then there's another word, one that carries a very different weight. Cult. That word doesn't suggest curiosity. It suggests danger, control, manipulation, something to stay away from. But here's the problem. Most people can't clearly explain the difference between the two. Welcome to Secret Societies, Cults, and Coffee. I'm your host, George Turner, and in this very first episode, we're going to establish a working framework. Because before we can examine specific groups, before we can separate myth from reality, we need to answer a fundamental question. What actually defines a secret society? And what defines a cult? And more importantly, where does that line begin and where does it blur? Let's start with something simple but often overlooked. Definitions shape perception. If you label something as secret society, people tend to think tradition, something exclusive, rituals, influence. But if you label something as a cult, people most likely will think control, isolation, manipulation, danger. But those labels are often applied emotionally, not analytically. And that's where confusion begins. Because not every secretive group is dangerous, and not every structured belief system is a cult. So instead of relying on labels, we're going to break down this structurally. We're going to look at purpose, transparency, authority, member autonomy, and psychological control. These are, in fact, the metrics that matter. At its core, a secret society is not defined by power. It's defined by selective access. A secret society typically has restricted membership, private rituals or traditions, internal knowledge not shared publicly, a structured hierarchy. But here's an important point to remember. Secrecy does not automatically imply harm. In many cases, secrecy serves as a function. It preserves tradition, it creates identity, it builds cohesion amongst its members. Think of it like this. A secret society is often about what is kept inside, not about controlling what's going on the outside. Members usually maintain their personal lives. They interact freely with the outside world, and they retain independent thought. And the last part is really critical, because a true secret society does not require you to surrender your identity. It may require discretion, but not dependency. Now, let's shift to something more complex. The term cult is widely used, but rarely defined with precision. In academic and psychological contexts, a cult is typically described as a high control group. And that phrase, high control, is the defining characteristic. It's not secrecy, not belief, it's control. A cult often exhibits centralized authority, and it's usually around a single leader, but it can extend to a pair of individuals. It has behavioral control, information control, emotional manipulation, and dependency creation. Let's break that down. In a cult, members are often told how to think, what to believe, and sometimes even how to feel. Information is filtered, dissent is discouraged, or even punished. And over time, individuals may lose the ability to question the system that they're in. That is the defining distinction. A cult doesn't just have beliefs, it actually enforces those implied beliefs. Now, here's where things get more nuanced. These aren't binary categories, they exist on a spectrum. On one end, you have open, voluntary organizations. On the other, you have highly controlled, isolating systems. And in between is a wide range of structures that can share traits from both sides. So instead of asking, is this a secret society or a cult? A better question is, how much control does the organization exert over its members? Because control, not secrecy, is in fact the real dividing line. Let's address some misconceptions that come up constantly. Misconception 1. Secrecy equates danger. Well, it doesn't. Many organizations maintain privacy without exerting harmful control. Secrecy can be cultural, historical, or symbolic. Misconception 2. All cults are religious. They're not. Cults can form around ideology, personal development systems, business structures, even social movements. What matters is not the belief system, it's the level of control. Misconception 3. Intelligent people don't join cults. This is one of the most damaging assumptions because it prevents people from recognizing vulnerability. Cults don't recruit weakness, they recruit curiosity, idealism, desire for belonging, and they build control slowly and gradually. Now we get to the most important and most uncomfortable part of this discussion. The line between secret societies and cults can blur. Some organizations may start as fraternal groups or philosophical circles, even ideological communities. But over time, if leadership becomes more centralized, if questioning is discouraged, if control increases, they can shift along that structural spectrum. That's why structure matters more than labels, because labels don't change behavior, structure does. If you're analyzing any organization, there are consistent indicators to watch for. Those being isolation from outside relationships, the us versus them mentality, punishment for questioning authority, information restriction, emotional manipulation, such as using fear, guilt, or obligation, and perhaps most importantly, the loss of individual autonomy. When a group begins to override personal judgment, it has moved beyond secrecy and into control. This is where understanding becomes more important than judgment. People don't join groups because they just want to be controlled. They join because they're looking for meaning, structure, belonging, and identity. And both secret societies and cults can offer these things. The difference is what happens after. A healthy structure supports the individual. A high controlled structure replaces the individuals. So why does this matter? Because in future episodes, we're going to examine historical organizations, modern groups and movements, and widely believed narratives. And without a framework, it's easy to fall into one of two traps: the blind acceptance or the blind suspicion. This show is not about either. It's about analysis. It's about understanding structure, influence, and perception without the distortion. So, as we move forward from this episode, keep one question in mind. How does this group operate? That's because that is where the truth usually is. Thank you for listening. What we've covered today is only a piece of a much larger picture. Because when it comes to secret societies and cult movements, the surface story is rarely the full story. If you found this episode to be valuable, make sure to follow the show so you don't miss a single episode. And if you want to support the podcast, the simplest way is to share it out with your friends and family. If you have a topic or an organization or even a question that you'd like for us to explore on this podcast, go ahead and reach out to us. We may include it in future episodes. Until next time, go ahead and take a closer look at what most other people overlook.